Dear students and colleagues, welcome to my course titled Educational Psychology. I am Dr. Mohammed Digyani, Assistant Professor specialized in teaching English as a foreign language, TEFL, Silhawas University Center, Barika, Algeria. Let's see together the content of the course. So it includes two chapters. The first chapter is an introduction to educational psychology, and the second one is about the learning process. Let's start with the first one. So in this part, we are going to define educational psychology, then to review or to tell something about the historical background, especially mentioning the two pioneers who left their fingerprints in this field, William James and John Dewey, and we move to the nature of teaching and the effective teaching. Let's start with defining educational psychology. As it is clearly seen, the term is composed of two words, education and psychology. In other words, we apply the principles of psychology to study the process of education. We often ask two main questions: how students learn, how best to teach students. Now let's move to the historical background. Of course, the field of educational psychology was founded by several pioneers just before the start of the 20th century. The first one was William James, who set the principles of psychology. So he insisted on the role of observing, teaching, and learning in the classroom. And the second pioneer is John Dewey, who said that the child is an active learner, the child should be a reflective problem solver, and all children should be given the right to learn. The nature of teaching. So teaching is multidimensional. It requires knowing students' diverse abilities and backgrounds, social and ethical matters, cognitive, academic, social, affective, moral, and health factors. The effective teaching. What makes teaching effective is establishing a sense of humor in the classroom, in order, of course, to break the ice between the teacher and his or her students, treating students equally, of course, delivering knowledge through interactive activities, and using effective instructor strategies such as lesson plan, classroom management, goal setting, and motivation. Individuals learn in different ways. Learning theories describe and explain how people take in, process, and retain knowledge. This is the learning process, the second part of our course. So, as it is known, we have two main schools. We have behaviorism and cognitivism. So, what do we mean by behaviorism? Of course, before defining this term, we need to mention some pioneers of this school. Let's start with the first one, who is Ivan Pavlov, best known for classical conditioning. Then, John Watson, known as the father of behaviorism. B.F. Skinner, known for operant conditioning. And Edward Thorndike, who set his rule called the law of effect. Let's describe together behaviorism. Watson claimed that psychology was not concerned with the mind or with human consciousness. Instead, psychology would be concerned only with behavior. How behaviorism impacted learning. Based on Thorndike's laws of learning, the behaviorist teacher believes that practice makes perfect, and learning is by doing. The behaviorist teacher encourages rote learning through drills and recitation. Students learn by repetition and reinforcement. Positive reinforcement encourages the learner to repeat a particular behavior. Let's give some examples and implications of behaviorist theory. We have drill, rote work, repetition practice, bonus point, participation point, verbal reinforcement, and establishing rules. Let's move to the second school, which is cognitivism. What is cognitivism? Cognitivism focuses on mental, unlike behaviorism. It focuses on mental processes which include how people perceive, think, remember, learn, and solve problems. Of course, we need to mention, the theory of development that belongs to John Piaget, who said that development refers to how people grow, adapt, and change over the course of their lifetimes through physical development, personality development, socio-emotional development, cognitive development, thinking and language development. Issues of development. Of course, there is a controversy which is called nature-nurture controversy. Of course, it is about the development predetermined at birth by heredity and biological factors. This is the first point of view. However, there is another one which is completely opposite. It is affected by experience and other environmental factors. Jean Piaget's view of cognitive development: a child builds cognitive structure, mental map, schema are for understanding and responding to physical experiences within his or her environment. How development occurs? These are the processes of development. We have schema, adaptation, assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. Of course, these are the 4 stages of development provided or proposed by Jean Piaget. Then let's move to the educational implications of Piaget theory. So the first one is a focus on the process of children's thinking, not just its products. Recognition of the crucial role of children's self-initiated active involvement in the learning activities, and the emphasis on practices aimed at making children adult-like in their thinking, acceptance of individual differences in developmental progress. Now let's move to the cognitive learning theory. How cognitivism impacted learning. Students are encouraged to become active constructors of their own knowledge through experiences that encourage assimilation and accommodation. Students should be made aware of his background knowledge and exposed to strategies to bridge from prerequisite skills to learning objectives. Students are encouraged to use metacognitive strategies. Now let's move to the examples and implications of cognitive learning theory. Classifying or chunking information, linking concepts, providing structure, real-world examples, discussion, problem-solving, analogies, imagery, providing pictures, and mnemonics. Thank you so much for your attention and see you in the next course.